Let's move on to the next question, which is a you've been elected governor, now what kind of question. And this is, if you become governor in January, how would you find out and measure what is working and what is not working in state-funded programs, schools, colleges, in education and workforce development? And then how would you seek to make changes and improvements? So measuring what works, fixing what is not working well enough. We'll start with Martha Coakley.
Sure. Thanks, Peter. Well, I'd start with what we do know. And we have had an opportunity, I think, to measure in different ways success, looking at our colleges, our junior colleges, looking at the work we've done around our pilot schools and our charter schools. What are the things that we've done in education that we've been able to measure in some ways? The question the new governor has to ask is, what are those the right measurements, and what else do we have to look at? And so I would go, if we want to measure what we're funding and whether we're getting money for it, I think we do something that I tend to do, which is go to folks and say, let's start with your self-evaluation. So I would ask all of our junior colleges, four-year colleges, and our schools to start to say, not from the top, we're going to tell you how to measure yourself, but let you set your metrics. How would you measure yourself? How would you show that you have been successful in what your mission is? And when you make organizations and people do that, I think we get some interesting responses. And I would give our organizations, both in our agencies and our schools, the opportunity to say, this is our mission, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and measure it that way. And then we would look and see where we need improvements.
Steve Grossman.
I've spent my life as a progressive jobs creator. That's who I am, that's what I've done. In my business and in all the nonprofit organizations in which I was involved over the years, many of them, I always insisted that we instill performance metrics in what we did. If you can't measure it, you can't manage it, and if you can't manage it, you can't lead. And we already have seen some examples of this. The governor and others insisted that we engage in performance funding for our community colleges. Boston Foundation was right at the epicenter of that effort, and it was a successful effort. And people may have complained at the beginning, but we know it's the right thing to do. We have a whole program called Pay for Success in Government now, where we're starting to provide funding for organizations, nonprofits, and others in government that work with government that actually have to go through performance metrics in order to earn a bonus. There's an organization in Chelsea, for example, called ROCA that's going to get a performance payment if they're able to reduce recidivism. So to the extent that we're able to instill the kind of leadership and management tools and techniques and performance metrics in everything we do, it's insisting on high standards. High standards, without high standards, we're not going to achieve the goals we hope to achieve. We're not going to achieve the goals we must achieve.
Measuring and fixing, Jeff McCormack.
So as an entrepreneur, I tell all of our CEOs, you can't manage what you can't measure. In 27 years of building companies, we measure just about everything. Our math software company, guess what? We measure student results. We also measure things like technical things, like how long it takes a page to load up. We have an environmental cleanup company. We measure down to a part per million how much oil is left in soil after our cleanup efforts. We measure things in drugs. You measure side effects. You measure efficacy. In government, unfortunately, they tend not to measure things in what I think the ultimate goals should be. What should the measurements be? The measurements should be people getting jobs and getting good jobs with solid wages. That's very important. Unfortunately, the conversations are often about how much money did we throw at a problem and gee, how many people do we have as part of it, and not did we drive the solution for their benefit. That's why you measure things.
Don Berwick.
I've worked on improvement for 3 decades. That's been the focus of my agenda. I've studied, learned, taught, practiced modern methods of management, executive leadership, and for improvement. And although I fully understand the need for metrics, you need to know kind of how you're doing. We have to be very, very careful about this one. Any smart executive knows that you must never let a metric replace the purpose or get in the way of a relationship with the people you're trying to help. So I will say, yes, metrics, but let's be careful. Look what we're doing in our public schools right now with high-stakes testing and teach-to-the-test metrics. We are demoralizing a workforce. We're taking away breadth from the experience of children. Don't let metrics get in the way. That's my first piece of advice to all of us as we try to build skills in our Commonwealth. 2 other things that are very important. Metrics are related to search, and we need global brains. This is a country that thinks too much inside, and I'll tell you there's stuff going on all over the world we should be emulating. In Switzerland, 70% of the kids in high school are in a business. We need to look carefully at that and understand how they're doing it. Finally, I want to add one other kind of metric. It's narrative. Never forget to speak and listen. It's talking with the workforce, talking with entrepreneurs like Agnes, understanding what they need. If we lose the narrative in the search for numbers, we're going to end up with mediocrity.
And Evan Falchuk.
Well, let's talk practically about the organizations that are working in the workforce development and job training. They're public entities and private ones, and they do collect a lot of data, and they are measuring all sorts of things. The challenge with measuring outcomes in these fields is figuring out what is the unifying set of data outcomes that we want to have that could work across the spectrum of programs that are being funded and working in this area. And we don't have that at this point. It could be created. It's a great opportunity to do. There has to be more information sharing. There has to be a notion even of a clearinghouse where people can get access to this data and see it. The federal government is starting to do this by saying we need to report on debt levels that students get when they graduate from school, whether they got a job afterwards, whether they felt as if, or at least some people have talked about saying whether they felt as if it was a good investment for themselves. This is a direction we're heading, and the data is enormously valuable. The challenge is it's there. The organizations that are working in this field are collecting it. We need leadership to be able to find the commonalities and to make meaning out of it.